In my last video, I dove into Need for Speed Underground 2 for the first time. I not only love discovering the game as a brand new player, but I also can finally say that I played it and I beat it. The game absolutely lived up to the hype that all of you built around it, but it wasn't without its faults. If you haven't watched it yet, I'll link the video on the screen now, and you can also find it in the description below. That video was part of my promise to play every Need for Speed release, and with Underground 2 now complete, and having already covered Most Wanted, link in the description, we're moving on to its direct sequel, Need for Speed Carbon. As a newcomer, I'm pumped to see what makes Carbon tick. I don't usually hear too much about this game, and I would even argue that its predecessor, Most Wanted, gets all of the love between the two. But that's not a good enough conclusion for me. I want to find out for myself if Need for Speed Carbon is worth playing today. Is it just a shoddy sequel, or is it an overshadowed, underrated classic? I plan to find out by the end of the video, so let's dive right into it together. My name is Mercy, and I played Need for Speed Carbon for the first time. Enjoy. Need for Speed Carbon was released on October 31st, 2006 for PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, Xbox 360, and PC. The game launched on November 17th, 2006 for PlayStation 3, and on the Wii on November 19th, 2006. There also exists a portable version called Need for Speed Carbon Own the City that launched on PSP, DS, and Game Boy Advance on October 31st, 2006. Own the City is a completely different game with a different map, storyline, characters, etc., so I've once again decided to hold off on that and talk about it in an upcoming Need for Speed handheld games video. Get subscribed so you don't miss that. Today I'll be playing the PC version of the game, which I believe is the best way to play the game today. I had to install a few mods to get the game up and running on my Windows 11 machine, but after that it was smooth sailing. I installed one to support my resolution and another to get my controller working, but those were just quick drag and drop fixes. It's also important to note that the PC version is the easiest way to enjoy this game to the fullest, as the game itself and its DLC have been delisted for years. So even if you have a physical copy on the 360, you won't be able to purchase any of the DLC, even if you wanted to, and if you're on any other platform, you're SOL. There are a few exclusive cars, tracks, and even some customizations locked behind DLC, so it's a bummer for preservation's sake, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's kick this video off with the story. Need for Speed Carbon continues the story that its predecessor, Need for Speed Most Wanted, started. The game kicks off with a flashback that takes place before the events of Most Wanted. In this, you, the player, are racing against three major crew leaders in Palmont City, those being Kenji, Wolf, and Angie. You're representing a fourth crew led by Darius, who lends you his blue Mark IV Supra. While racing, suddenly the other three drivers are hit with what looks like an EMP, and are disabled as the police show up and bust everybody except for you. Nikki, your girlfriend at the time, hastily throws the bag of cash in your car, and you narrowly escape the cops. You later get a call from Darius telling you to leave town and to not look back. As you look in the bag, it's full of what looks like traffic tickets, not a single dollar bill inside that bag. Fast forward to the present day, and we're arriving in Palmont City in our M3. As we're driving into town, Cross, who is now working as a bounty hunter, chases us down, and we wreck the M3 trying to outrun him. Cross hops out and starts talking to us, saying he has a score to settle, when suddenly Darius shows up. If you remember, there was a big bounty on our head leaving Rockport, and so Darius pays that bounty on the condition that the player does as he says. That involves forming his own crew and challenging those other crew leaders from earlier for territory. And so as you progress through the game, more details are uncovered about that fateful night in Palmont and who really orchestrated the events that transpired. The story here in Need for Speed Carbon is pretty interesting. I do like this kind of storytelling where we only get a small glimpse of this pivotal moment early on, but over time more layers and more points of view are added until it finally comes to its conclusion. With that being said, Carbon's story is very predictable, but I'm of the opinion that it's, one, set up that way, and two, it doesn't need to be anything more. Maybe it's not fair to the series to generalize, but I've accepted that the Need for Speed titles are going to have simple stories like this. It serves as a means to move the gameplay forward, and it successfully does that. I will say though, I am so glad that the live action cutscenes have returned. Every character in this game, friend or foe, is portrayed in this over-the-top, cartoony type of way. It's like, I can't see any of these people existing in real life, and I really wouldn't want it any other way. Let's roll it back a little and talk about forming that crew and taking over Palmont. I'm not sure what city Palmont is exactly based on. If you know, leave a comment down below. But it's broken up into 4 different territories, each controlled by a different crew. Downtown is controlled by Kenji, leader of the Bushido crew. Kempton to the south is held by Angie, leader of the 21st Street crew. Fortuna to the west is controlled by Wolf, leader of the TFK crew. And finally, Silverton to the north is controlled by Darius, leader of the Stacked Deck crew. So as you progress through the game, you'll be racing against these crews and one by one, neighborhood by neighborhood, taking over their territory with your crew. Each territory is split up into smaller regions with 3 events per region. Beat 2 of these events and the region is yours. As you take over entire territories and wipe crews off the map, members of those defeated crews will ask to join your crew. Now what's really cool about this is that you can bring these guys into the races with you. At the very beginning of the game, you start out with Neville, who is this just really funny guy with a big goofy personality, and shortly afterwards Sal joins you. He's this real serious type who's a big fan of yours. As you progress, you'll get 4 more crew members to choose from. Each crew member brings something unique to the table. For example, Neville is a blocker, meaning you can target specific drivers on the track and he'll ride ahead and try to slow them down. Sal, on the other hand, is a scout, so he'll shout out shortcuts and alternate routes over the radio while also marking them on your minimap. There's a third role called drafters, and drafters will drive in front of you and let you draft off of them, which speeds up your car and then you can slingshot around them. Each class has its pros and cons, of course, but I found myself more often than not rolling with a scout. Why is that? Well, I admit it's more of a personal thing. I tend to get tunnel vision when I'm behind, trying to catch up, so I'm kind of like hyper-focused on the car in front of me, analyzing their line, and I'm trying to find anywhere on the track where I potentially have more speed than them. This is what I would normally do in any other racer, but this game, of course, has shortcuts, and so by me locking onto them, I'll miss shortcuts a lot of the time. And since the scout shouts out upcoming shortcuts, I found that to be pretty useful. You could make the argument that once you've learned the track, you don't really need a scout, but I thought they were nice to have. On top of playing their class role, Sal specifically bailed me out of many tight spots, because if your crew member wins a race, it counts as a win for you and your crew. I'm kind of torn on that though. One side of me thinks, okay, yeah, our crew won. Logically, it makes sense for us to advance, but at the same time, I don't feel like I've earned it because I really didn't. I kind of just showed up and my partner did all of the heavy lifting. Granted, there were races where I won and my partner was nowhere to be found, so yeah. I don't know what I'm trying to get at, so let's just move on. Beyond just the on-track skills, crew members give you different perks. For example, Nikki, who joins you late into the game, gives you a 50% bonus amount of boost, and also gives you a 10% discount on new car purchases, whereas Yumi gives you a 25% bonus to your boost, but a 10% discount on performance parts. Sal and Colin even enable Autosculpt, which is the coolest thing they've added into the game, but I'll get into that a bit later. Point being, each crew member brings something different to the table, and you can have up to 3 members in your crew at a time. So I tended to bring Sal with me to the races, but kept Colin and Samson in my crew. I really enjoyed this. Sure, they got in the way sometimes during the races, and sometimes won for me and took away that excitement of crossing the finish line first. But the strategy of picking and choosing who I wanted in my crew, I think, heavily outweighs the negatives. Let's talk about those event types because you won't be able to bring a crew member into every single one. Need for Speed Carbon has a bunch of events that are pretty standard as far as the series goes, as well as 2 new event types and a returning favorite. There are, of course, the usual suspects like circuit racing, sprint racing, checkpoint races, and my favorite of the bunch, Speed Trap. I like Speed Trap because you're not racing against a clock or directly against your competitors, but instead each checkpoint counts your speed, and at the end of the race these points are tallied up and a winner is crowned based on your total. It's a race that enables you to have a little bit of strategy. It's not necessarily about position on the track, but more so about your raw speed. I will say though, I found these events much easier when I was at the front of the field. That way I didn't have to worry about other competitors getting in my way and slowing me down. While we're on the subject of racing, I gotta shout out the sense of speed in this game. It is the best I've experienced in the series so far. The motion blur is extreme, but I wouldn't say it's enough to seriously affect your vision. It's hard to explain. It looks perfect to me though. I've always been a big proponent of motion blur in racing games, when it's done right of course, and for me this is about as good as it gets. That combined with the camera shake, the speed lines coming off the car, the fact that the hood shakes with you too, it's so immersive and I love it. Earlier I mentioned how that in certain modes crew members won't join you, and one of those modes is drifting. I'll admit, at first, I was a bit apprehensive about its return. Drifting is completely absent from Most Wanted, and wasn't something I was particularly good at in the Underground games, but I love it here. It is actually one of my favorite things to do in Need for Speed Carbon. No, really, like, this is coming from the guy who claims he doesn't really like drifting all that much. I absolutely loved drifting in this, and I kind of think my opinion is shifting on drifting in general. I don't know if it's because I'm getting better at it and I'm understanding the nuances a little more, or if this game's drifting mechanics are just that intuitive or easy to pick up. But for whatever reason, I just found that stringing my drifts together was easier in this game versus the Undergrounds. I did bounce off a few walls here and there, but I wasn't even mad when I did. It was super fun to be able to push that limit and get a higher score, especially when you consider this game's sense of speed I mentioned earlier. Drifting is great and all, but I'd still rank it as the second best mode in the game. What's the best, you might ask? It's gotta go to the Canyon Duels. Canyon Duels are the boss races of Need for Speed Carbon, so when you finally complete enough events to completely take over a crew's territory, the leader of that crew will challenge you. How these work is that you'll follow your opponent through these canyon routes that surround Palmont, and depending on your distance from them, you'll start building up points. The closer you are to them, the more points you'll acquire. Once you two cross the finish line, then it's your turn to lead, except this time that point total you acquired will tick downwards, based on how far they are from you. If you make it to the finish line with some points left, you can have 1 point left. You've won the duel and won the territory. These are so intense. I mean, there's no nitrous, no teammates. Some of the guardrails are even destructible, so if you take a corner too hot and wreck, you go right through it. It's game over, you gotta restart. As the event goes on, portraits of your opponent pop up on the top left corner of the screen to make fun of you, laughing when you make even just a tiny minor mistake. It all culminates in this rising intensity, this anxiety of making a mistake. The stakes are high and every corner matters. The only negative thing I can say about these is that there aren't more of them. I really want to run more races on these courses. They're not accessible in free roam and only ever used for the duels and this game's version of downhill drifts, which are still fun, don't get me wrong, but they don't carry the same stakes as the duels. There is one other new mode which is only available on the PS3, 360, and PC versions of the game called Race Wars. Yeah, maybe not the best name for this mode, but they are genuinely uneventful beyond that. They're just circuit or sprint races with 20 cars on the track. That's it, that's the mode. Which, you know, I can't lie, it is a sight to behold the first time you do one of these, don't get me wrong, I mean, it's crazy, but that wears off very quickly once you're ahead and realize you're never going to see any of those cars in the back anyway. So, not a huge fan of these. It's more like they exist as a way to say, like, wow, look at the power of next-gen consoles, guys, instead of a genuine attempt at making something interesting. Overall, I'd say that the roster of modes in Need for Speed Carbon is solid, but what are those modes without cool-ass cars to drive in them? The answer is nothing really, but thankfully Carbon has an insane roster of cars to drive, with one of 6 to choose from at the start. These cars are the Alfa Romeo Brera, Chrysler 300C, Mazda Speed 3, Mazda RX-8, Mercedes CLK 500, and a 1967 Chevy Camaro SS. Nice. I decided to go with the RX-8 because I wanted to start with a tuner on my first playthrough, and the Mazda Speed 3 just looks ugly to me. The RX-8 isn't much of a looker either, but those were my options. I did consider the Camaro. I love this car, but I thought it would handle like a boat, and I wanted something a bit more nimble for my first playthrough. Funny enough, as much as I initially didn't like the RX-8, I ended up sticking with it for the entire first area. What I find interesting about this choice is that since I picked the tuner, I started in Kenji's downtown territory, racing against other tuners. If I picked, say, the Chrysler or Camaro, then I would have started in Kempton against Angie. Each of these cars belongs to a specific class in Need for Speed Carbon, and each crew you race against has an affinity for a specific class of car. It's pretty cool and gives each crew a sense of identity along with crew-specific paint schemes and car class-specific playlists. Yes, you heard that right. Playlists. I have a bone to pick with this system. While yes, it does give each class of car, and by extension, each crew their own soundtrack, it can also potentially lock you out of hearing entire parts of the soundtrack. Say you're like me and you pick a tuner, you're only going to hear that tuner playlist. Later on, I had bought a muscle car, and that's when I realized, wow, there's actually some rock music in this game. As far as the songs themselves go, I mean, they're fine, I guess. They aren't my first or even second pick for a Need for Speed game. Don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of bands here that I love, like Wolfmother, The Bronx, Priestess, but I never got into a rhythm of hearing them. I mean, I never even bought an exotic car, so the rap playlist may as well not even exist. Point being, I barely got to hear any of these songs, mostly because I had tuners. And it's not like the EDM playlist is bad, I just don't listen to this genre of music in my free time, but it's fine. I just find it odd that they got away from the system established in the prior games, meaning rap in the garage, EDM, and rock during the races. And another gripe with this system, sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant here, these songs don't even play during most of the events in Need for Speed Carbon. This game has an original soundtrack, which is great by the way, no disrespect to the composers, but it takes center stage while the licensed tracks take a back seat. I don't understand why they chose this of all things to change, and I think for future playthroughs, I'm probably gonna just install a mod to restore the old way. As always, I've linked a soundtrack in the description if you would like to hear it for yourself. Sorry, I spent a little more time on that than I wanted to. So once I took over the first territory from Kenji, I was able to then pick and choose who I wanted to go up against next, either Angie or Wolf. I went for Angie purely because I wanted to try out some muscle cars and see how they stacked up. In total, there are a whopping 38 different cars to use in Need for Speed Carbon's career mode. That is nuts. To put it into perspective, Underground 2 has 31, and Most Wanted has 33. Important to note that a few of these cars were DLC, but the point still stands. Many of these return from Most Wanted, like the Porsche Carrera GT and Toyota Mark IV Supra, but there are some new ones as well, like the Jaguar XK or the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 9. But of course, I decided to play it safe and traded my RX-8 for, take a wild guess, the Mazda RX-7. I mean, come on, what else needs to be said about this car? It's an absolute beast, and once again, quickly became my workhorse for most of my playthrough, getting me through the entire second and third areas. As you can see, I modded the absolute piss out of this car, so it seems fitting that we talk about the customization options. Car mods are divided up into two categories, one being for performance and the other for visuals. Let's just start with performance parts. There are 7 different categories of parts you can install on your car, and if you're familiar with the series, these shouldn't be a surprise to you at all. Upgrades include engine, transmission, suspension, nitrous, tires, brakes, and superchargers/turbochargers. What I found surprising about these upgrades is just how customizable they really are. Carbon may not have a dyno like Underground 2, but you can still make adjustments to each part to kind of set your car up the way you want it to be. For example, say I want a car that maybe has a lower top speed but reaches that top speed quicker. I can then tweak my transmission a bit using these 3 sliders to get my desired result. I like how simple it is this time around, but also how each option is visually laid out in the menus. Need for Speed Most Wanted has a very similar system, but no real explanation for what changing each slider does. Whereas here, it's very simple to say, oh, moving the slider makes my car oversteer more or understeer more. It's nice. I'm a fan of this. I dig it. Performance customization, though, is pretty par for the course as far as Need for Speed goes, but the visual customizations are where Carbon really goes above and beyond. There are still wheels and spoilers and body kits, that sort of thing that we've already seen in previous titles, but the big new feature here is Autosculpt. Autosculpt allows you to really, and I mean really, adjust the look of different parts like bumpers and spoilers and skirts and hoods and wheels. Do you want a big ass blower coming out of your hood? You can do that. Is the splitter too small by default? Make it bigger. Want to add vents to your front end? You can do that. It's just this extra layer of customization. I didn't realize I needed it until I got a chance to play with it. You can stretch out certain sections of your bumper or add different vents and fins and all sorts of stuff depending on the part you choose. I will say every Autosculpt part is specific to Autosculpt, so it's not like you can just modify any part in the game, but man, there are still tons of options. I gave my RX-7 this absolutely gaudy body kit. It looks just awful from the side and the back with these unnecessary cutouts and side skirts, but I love it. That's my baby. I made it. It makes it so your car is truly your car, your creation. After the RX-7, I moved on to the Chevy Corvette Z06, and of course, I took it right to the shop to throw parts on it. It got to a point where I was, of course, excited to upgrade the performance of my car, but Autosculpt stole the show. This is no exaggeration when I say this, so hear me out. Autosculpt is Need for Speed Carbon's best feature, and something I would love to see in more games, even in modern releases. I've heard that Need for Speed Pro Street and a few of the sequels have this feature as well, so I cannot wait to dive into these games, so get subscribed so you don't miss any future Need for Speed episodes. I'd spend, I don't know, half an hour just trying different bumpers and skirts and just trying to get the look I was trying to achieve. After messing around for a while, I managed to make my Corvette look like this. It's so much fun swapping out parts and trying out different combinations to see what's possible. It serves no purpose progression-wise, but it tickled that creative side of my brain, and I'm all about that. It gives you time to just decompress and really take a break away from all of the modes, and it gives you an opportunity to make every car unique and your own. Even with all of these goofy customizations on the Corvette, it quickly became my favorite car in the game, bar none. It's just a beautiful machine and one of my favorite cars of all time. Let's be real for a second, it's hard to go wrong with any generation of Corvette. And I had every intention of taking this car to the end of the game until I saw that the Ford GT became available. If you follow this channel, you know that I'm legally obligated to use it if available. That might be an exaggeration, but god damn, what a car this is. It was fast, it was quick, it was nimble, and those sounds, those sweet, sweet sounds. Here, take a listen to it real quick. And I've also put in a few other cars. Just take a listen.
One down.
I could listen to this all day, but unfortunately, we do have to sort of address the elephant in the room. We have to talk about the biggest issue I have with the Ford GT and this game in general. That issue is simply the fact that I barely even got to use it. By the time I finally got to the Ford GT, I only had 3 or 4 events left before the end of the game. It's just a total buzzkill. I wanted time to enjoy one of the greatest pieces of machinery ever created. And the thing is, this isn't just a 4GT issue. All of the highest end tier 3 cars are locked to Silverton. So you might be saying, what's the problem with that? They're tier 3s. Well, first off, Silverton isn't accessible until you've conquered the other 3 regions in Palmont, which, isn't necessarily a problem. But the thing is, once you've conquered Silverton, the game is over. You don't get any time to actually enjoy the fruits of your labor. And this doesn't change based on which car you picked in the beginning. I feel like I could give it some leeway if it did. Say if I picked the Camaro in the beginning, then maybe I'd unlock the high-end muscle cars much earlier, but the exotics and tuners later. That would make sense to me. However, it isn't really like that. I mean, there are a few tier 2 cars that unlock in this manner where the class you picked in the beginning matters, but there isn't a single tier 3 car that unlocks like that. All tier 3 cars, if we're focusing just purely on campaign progression, as in beating events, taking over territories, regardless of class, are locked to Silverton. And that just flat out stinks in my book. That's unacceptable. It doesn't allow you to really enjoy any of these cars for longer than a few hours tops. I just find it odd that the game has about half of its roster of cars spread out across those first 3 territories, but locks the other half of them into one singular territory, which takes you about the same amount of time to clear as any of the other territories. It's a bizarre choice, and one I wish they had changed. I think it hurts the game locking you out of these high-end cars for so long and then having very little time to enjoy them on the other side. Though I will say there is one mode outside of the career mode that will allow you to try out all kinds of cars, and that is the Challenge series. The Challenge series, like the name implies, is a series of challenges that put you to the test in a variety of different modes with different cars for each challenge. These challenges can be anything from racing to drifting to canyon duels, you name it. But they also incorporate pursuits and specific goals you need to complete during those pursuits. Things like spending a certain amount of time in a pursuit or disabling a certain number of cops during the pursuit. On top of this, there are 3 tiers to each challenge: bronze, silver, and gold, and they get progressively more difficult with each. For example, let's use the trading paint challenge as an example. Bronze, we're at 5 police disables, silver, we're at 10, and at gold, we're at 30. I found more fun in the police pursuits in the Challenge series than any of the pursuits I did in the career mode. I didn't mention them until now because, truthfully, they felt like an afterthought to me, and so they're an afterthought in my video. Police pursuits do not influence career progression whatsoever, and police will show up occasionally during your career events. They'll kind of just chase you after the race is over. Sometimes they'll show up during an event, but again, they kind of just roll over. They're total pushovers. You can still be busted like in Most Wanted or have your car impounded, but this didn't happen to me a single time during my entire playthrough. Yeah, not even once was I busted. I was not impressed at all by the police in this game, and I believe that if they're going to include them, they need to be a bigger part of the game. I think they need to affect progression in some kind of way, whether that's clearing out cops from a territory or getting a certain amount of money to maybe pay them off or something. I don't know. As it stands, the cops in Carbon kind of just feel like a leftover mechanic from Most Wanted, where they couldn't figure out how to really implement them into Carbon's territory-based progression. While the Challenge series returns from Most Wanted, it feels fresh, and it has a purpose as far as the career mode goes, since you unlock different parts, and you even unlock some cars that you can use in career mode, which is super cool. It gives the Challenge series some purpose beyond something extra to do at the end of the game, and gives it some utility during your playthrough, so I'm a big fan. I dig it a lot. All in all, Need for Speed Carbon was a blast to play. In the beginning of the video, I asked if this game was either a shoddy sequel or an overshadowed, underrated classic. After playing the game, I can confidently say that it is more of the latter than the former. I love the selection and variety of cars, the tone of the characters and story. The canyon duels are just... God, they're just so much fun. I want to do more of them. And the overall vibe of the game is phenomenal. And you can't forget about Autosculpt. Autosculpt is just... I can't harp on it enough. It is one of the sickest features I have ever seen in a racing game. If it was up to me, every new racing game would include this. But for all of its pros, the game isn't without faults, and I do dislike how late into the game you get those tier 3 cars. How they handled the soundtrack is a big one, and how disposable the police feel when compared to Most Wanted or even Hot Pursuit 2's police. But as a sum of its parts, the good heavily, and I mean heavily, outweighs the bad, and Need for Speed Carbon proudly stands right up there alongside Underground 2 and Most Wanted. What a phenomenal game this is, and it's one that I will definitely be revisiting in the future. Enough about me though, it's time to turn it over to you guys. I have 2 questions for you all today. First, what do you think of Need for Speed Carbon? And second, what were your favorite cars to use during your playthrough? I would love to hear from you all. I try to read every comment posted. Thank you all so much for watching. These videos take a really long time for me to make. This is a one-man show after all, so thank you so much for being patient with me. Also, huge shout out to my highest tier patrons CD-ROM Fossil and Arcade Racing Central, and all of my generous supporters over on Patreon. You all are amazing. My name is Mercy, and as always, have a good one.